It wasn't the smell of smoke or sewage. It was the sterile, sad smell of failure. That's what hit me the hardest when I walked into the storage unit. Cold concrete and dust, and the faint, recycled air of something finished. We had 2 hours. 2 hours to cram everything we owned, everything that was left, into a 10 by 10 space. It was a Monday morning, a brutal, too bright morning, and I remember looking down at my hands. They were shaking. Not from the cold, but from the realization. This was the end. It wasn't just a move. It wasn't downsizing. It was a liquidation of a lie. A year ago, those hands were gripping the steering wheel of a brand new imported sedan. Black on black leather. The kind of car you feel seen in. The kind of car we drove, windows down, blasting music, feeling like we had conquered the world. Now, I was carrying a box full of kitchen towels and half-empty spice jars. My wife, Sarah, was standing by the entrance holding a picture frame. It was a photo from our honeymoon in Bali. We were laughing, sun-kissed, wrapped up in each other. That couple felt like strangers now. They were rich, beautiful, and untouched by reality. The silence between us was heavier than any box. It was a silence filled with 1,000 unsaid accusations. "The couch is next," she finally mumbled, not looking at me. Her voice was flat, rinsed clean of emotion. That was worse than the fighting. The couch. Our plush, velvet, designer couch. The centerpiece of our beautifully staged apartment. The apartment that was always full of people, full of laughter, full of the illusion of success. It was being repossessed later that afternoon. That was the last piece of the furniture puzzle. Everything else had already gone, swallowed by the gaping mouth of debt we had desperately tried to feed. I looked at the stack of boxes. Each one a monument to a terrible decision. Our designer clothes, now folded and stuffed, smelled faintly of the expensive cologne and perfume we used to bathe ourselves in. The boxes of wine glasses, the ones we clinked with our friends while discussing our next big move. The expensive espresso machine we used maybe 3 times. It wasn't just things we were losing. We were losing the story we told ourselves about who we were. We were Matt and Sarah. The power couple. The ones who had made it in their early 30s. The ones who looked perfect on Instagram. Behind the lens, we were a mess. We were bleeding cash. We were fighting behind closed doors. We were terrified the whole structure would collapse. And now it had. The eviction notice had been the first punch. The bank freezing our accounts was the second. But the final sickening blow was the realization that our glamorous life was pure fiction, held together by a thread of maxed-out credit cards and a mortgage we never should have signed. Sarah finally put the picture frame down on top of a box marked MISC. "I'm going to get the last load from the car," she said, her voice catching just a little. I watched her walk away, and in that small moment of solitude, I let the raw, ugly truth wash over me. We had been so focused on looking rich that we forgot how to actually live. We chased the appearance of wealth because it gave us an audience. It validated us. It gave us material for our social media feeds, the perfect, curated life. But now our audience was gone. The likes had stopped. The reality was a 10 by 10 foot cage of sadness and regret. I ran my hand over the cold steel door of the storage unit. It felt like the gate to a prison. A prison we built, brick by borrowed brick. I never thought I'd feel humiliated by a box of socks, but I did. Every single item was a flashing sign that said, "You failed." And the worst part? The thing that made my stomach clench and my eyes sting? It wasn't the money. It was the silence between us. The betrayal wasn't from an outside source. It was from 2 people who stopped being honest with each other years ago, trading intimacy for an aesthetic. We had everything we thought we wanted, and in losing it all, we finally understood we had nothing. When Sarah came back, she didn't have boxes. She had the keys to the apartment. "That's it," she whispered. I turned them in. "We're officially homeless." She looked at me, her eyes red but dry. She didn't cry. I didn't cry. We were beyond tears. We were numb. We locked the storage unit. That terrible smell was sealed inside. And we walked away from our entire life, carrying nothing but the clothes on our backs, the shame in our hearts, and the question, where do we go from here? It all started so simply. The good kind of simple. Sarah and I met in college. We were 2 driven kids with big dreams, but we didn't dream of things. We dreamed of freedom. Freedom to travel, to work on our own terms, to build a life where we didn't have to answer to anyone. We lived in a tiny apartment above a laundromat. The kind of place where the heat only worked sometimes, and the shower water pressure was a cruel joke. But we were happy. We had huge philosophical debates over cheap takeout, fueled by ambition and that young, stupid belief that we could conquer anything. Our first big break came when we launched a digital marketing firm. We caught the wave at the right time. Our ideas were fresh, our hustle was relentless, and the money started coming in. Not rich money, but comfortable money. We paid off our student loans. We took a nice vacation. We were on the track we planned. But then the slide began. It didn't start with a crash. It started with a small, insidious whisper. It was a whisper that said, "You deserve this." It started with the car. Not the black sedan, not yet. It started with a slightly too expensive SUV. It was practical, we argued. For clients. For image. Then came the apartment. We moved out of the old place and into a sleek, glass-walled building downtown. We didn't need the space, but our friends oohed and awed. We liked the sound of their envy. That's the pivot point, isn't it? The moment you stop buying things you need and start buying things to signal to the world. We started spending to keep up with the story we were telling. Client meetings had to be at the trendiest coffee shops. Our clothing had to be labels. Our vacations had to be shareable. Every purchase was a prop in the Matt and Sarah show. Our social media became a full-time job. We weren't just living our lives, we were curating a lifestyle. Look at us. We're successful. We're happy. You should follow us. We were chasing the dopamine hit of the like button. The business was still doing okay, but our spending was growing at an exponential rate. We were using the company credit cards for personal expenses and justifying it as marketing. Then came the new car. The black sedan. The final, stupid act of vanity. I remember the day I signed the lease. The salesman was slick, whispering sweet nothings about low monthly payments. I barely looked at the interest rate. I just looked at my reflection in the polished black hood. I looked like a success. That feeling was worth any price. Sarah did the same thing with clothes and travel. She'd book first-class flights to meet a potential client, a client we could have met on Zoom. But she needed the pictures. She needed the validation of the perfect airport lounge shot. We weren't partners anymore. We were co-conspirators in a financial crime against ourselves. The fighting started quietly. Small, bitter remarks whispered late at night. "Did you really need that watch?" I'd snap, knowing my own new suit was still in the closet with the tags on. "It was a gift to myself, Matt." "You wouldn't understand," she'd fire back, the ice in her voice chilling me. We stopped talking about money. It became a minefield. We just paid the minimums, avoided the statements, and kept throwing cash at the problem to make the noise stop. The noise eventually became a siren. The market shifted. Two of our biggest clients merged and cut us loose. Just like that, 30% of our revenue vanished. Panic. We didn't pivot. We didn't downsize. We doubled down on the lie. We started borrowing. High-interest lines of credit. Business loans used for rent. Loans against the cars. We were like addicts chasing that final, perfect high, convinced that one more big deal would save us. I remember one night, Sarah was asleep next to me and I was staring at the ceiling, my heart hammering like a drum. I opened my banking app and for the first time I looked at the number. $312,000. That's how much we owed. Not a mortgage, that was separate. This was the consumer debt. The shiny, frivolous, utterly unnecessary debt. I felt physically ill. I wanted to wake her up, to confess, to scream, but I couldn't. The shame was a physical weight on my chest. I closed the app and tried to pretend I hadn't seen it. The call started. Subtle at first, then aggressive. Our landlord was a brute and he didn't mince words. We missed rent 1 month, and the tone of his emails went from professional to threatening. We started isolating ourselves. We stopped hosting parties. We stopped answering the phone unless we recognized the number. The friends who only admired our lifestyle started to fade away, noticing the cracks in the facade. That's when the self-destructive behavior kicked in. I started drinking too much. Not raging, sloppy drunk, but enough to blur the edges of the crushing anxiety. Sarah started burying herself in work. Fake work, things that looked productive but weren't revenue generating. Anything to avoid looking at the bank statements. The worst night was when we got into a real, glass-shattering fight. I threw a chair across the room. She stood there, just staring at me, her eyes full of a mixture of disgust and utter exhaustion. "You promised me freedom, Matt," she said, her voice shaking. "You promised we wouldn't be like this. We're worse. We're in a cage of our own making." I couldn't defend myself. She was right. A few days later, she left. Not for good, she said. Just to stay with her sister in a different state for a while. To clear her head. But I knew what it was. It was an evacuation. She was saving herself from the sinking ship. And so, I was alone when the eviction notice arrived. Alone in the beautiful, silent, empty apartment. The apartment we couldn't afford, filled with things we didn't need, and now devoid of the one person I actually did need. That's when the final collapse happened. The creditors closed in. The bank took the cars. The company dissolved in a flurry of humiliating paperwork. The day of the storage unit was the day we technically reunited. But we were shells. Two separate, broken pieces, packing up the evidence of our spectacular failure. When we locked that cold steel door, we weren't just locking up our things. We were locking up our life together. That's why Sarah walked away from the storage unit and didn't look back. She didn't go to her sister's house this time. She took a bus to a cheap motel 2 towns over. I went to a buddy's couch. We had to lose each other to realize we couldn't be saved as a unit, only as individuals. We were finally at zero. Rock bottom isn't a place. It's a feeling. A deep, hollow ache in your gut that tells you the comfortable descent is over. Now you have to climb. For the next 4 months, I was the living definition of humiliation. I was crashing on my friend Liam's couch. Liam was the kind of guy we used to condescend to, the one with the steady, boring job, the cheap apartment, and no flash. He was the only one who answered the phone. The silence from Sarah was deafening. We texted maybe once a week, and the messages were purely transactional. Did you sign the papers? How's the car title situation? Nothing about us. I spent my days applying for jobs. Entry-level jobs. The irony was a bitter pill. I had managed a 6-figure firm, and now I was begging for an interview at a bookstore. No one wanted to hire me. My resume was too flashy. They saw a risk. They saw someone who was going to quit the second a better opportunity came along. They were right to be suspicious. I wasn't financially destitute for the first time. I was spiritually destitute. One night, Liam and I were watching a basketball game. He opened a beer and I took a glass of water. I had quit drinking. I had to. I couldn't afford the luxury of self-pity anymore. He looked at me not with pity but with a kind of gentle curiosity. "Why did you do it, Matt?" he asked quietly without taking his eyes off the screen. "You guys had a great thing going. Why the cars and the trips? Why the debt?" I didn't have a slick answer. Not the one I used to give clients. "I don't know," I admitted. The words felt heavy, honest, and completely new. "I guess. I wanted to be admired more than I wanted to be happy." Liam nodded. "Yeah, I get that. You traded your actual life for your highlight reel." That's when it hit me. The first turning point. The goal wasn't to get rich again. The goal was to get honest. I needed to rebuild my foundation, and that meant going back to zero. I stopped applying for marketing jobs. I needed something simple, something where I could work with my hands, something that didn't require a phone or a laptop and a pretense of grandeur. I found a job working as a maintenance assistant for a small, local property management company. Minimum wage. Dirty work. It was humbling. I was hauling trash, fixing leaky toilets, and scrubbing the mold out of abandoned apartments. I was doing the work of the people I used to dismiss with a wave of my hand. I was getting dirty, and for the first time in years I felt clean. I was making maybe $15 an hour, but I was living below my means. I paid Liam $200 a month for the couch, and I saved every other penny. The fear was still there, but it was a different kind of fear. The fear of slipping back, not the fear of being exposed. Meanwhile, Sarah was going through her own reconstruction. She was working 2 shifts at a diner near her sister's place. She was sleeping in a fold-out bed. She was anonymous. One day I got a text from her. Not about money. "I hate this job. But for the first time I can look my boss in the eye, and he doesn't think I'm trying to manipulate him. It's just work. It's weirdly peaceful." It was the first human message we had shared in months. I typed back, "Me too. I'm fixing toilets. It's helping me clear my head." "Good," she replied. "Stay safe." That was our first small victory, 2 broken people admitting their pain and wishing each other well without the mask of wealth. As I worked, I started seeing the world differently. I saw the real money. It wasn't in digital marketing, it was in the unsexy reality of property management. People always need a place to live. And landlords always need people to clean up the messes. I started talking to my boss, an old, weary man named Mr. Henderson. He had been doing this for 30 years. He drove a beat-up Ford pickup and wore the same 3 shirts. "The secret, son," he'd grumble while handing me a plunger, "is reliability. Show up on time. Finish the job. Don't lie about the problem. People pay for problems to disappear, not for a fancy presentation." I learned about plumbing, drywall, and, most importantly, margins. I saw how much he was billing clients and how much he was paying me. The profit wasn't massive on a single job, but it was steady. It was built on a foundation of reality, not debt. I started dreaming again, but this time the dream was small, quiet, and achievable. I called Sarah. It was a terrifying call. I have an idea, I said, skipping the small talk. She was quiet for a long time. Oh God, Matt. Please tell me it's not another app idea. I almost laughed. No apps. It's cleaning. I explained my new realization. The need for reliable, detail-oriented cleaning and maintenance services for smaller landlords and short-term rental owners. We could do it ourselves. Just us. We have to start at the bottom, Sarah. I mean truly the bottom. We use public transit. We buy industrial supplies with cash. We split the few jobs I can find for us. I braced myself for the rejection, for the reminder of the life we left behind. Instead, she said, "When can I come back?" That was the turning point that mattered. Not the business idea, but the request to reunite in the struggle. She quit the diner. I quit the maintenance job. I gave Mr. Henderson a solid month's notice, and he even shook my hand. Sarah came back to me, not to the old life, but to Liam's cramped apartment, where she slept on an air mattress on the floor. We were a team again, but a different team. Our cleaning business, which we quietly named Reset, a nod to our life, was the opposite of our old firm. There was no branding, no website, no logo. We started with flyers we printed at a library. Badly designed, simple flyers that just listed services: deep cleaning, move-in/move-out prep, minor repairs. Our first client was a tough, retired woman who owned a single rental property. We bid low, almost at cost, just to get the job. The apartment was a disaster. Tenants had trashed it. Mold in the bathroom, grease welded to the kitchen walls, nicotine stains everywhere. The old US would have hired a crew, talked a good game, and marked up the labor. The new us showed up in old t-shirts, covered our heads, and got to work. 18 hours straight. We didn't talk much, but we worked in perfect synchronization. She tackled the kitchen with a ferocity I hadn't seen since our early startup days. I handled the bathroom and the small plumbing issues. We worked until our bodies ached and our hands were raw. When we finished, the apartment gleamed. It didn't just look clean, it smelled new. The client came in, walked through the apartment slowly, and then she looked at us, two filthy, exhausted people standing in her spotless kitchen. She didn't haggle. She handed us a check for the full amount, plus a $100 bonus. "You too," she said, her voice gruff but kind. "You're real. And you're thorough. I need you every time." That $100 bonus felt like more money than the $1 million deals we used to close. It was earned. It was respect. We used that money to buy better equipment, better chemicals, our own cheap used car, a rusty van that became our new office. That was the true climax. Not a grand transaction, but the moment we realized the new currency of our lives was hard work and integrity. Slowly, painfully, we grew. We didn't borrow. We didn't chase the spotlight. We lived on the air mattress and the couch for a full year. Every dollar went back into the business or into our debt repayment fund. The debt repayment fund became our new obsession. Not a car fund or a travel fund, but a fund to right our past wrongs. The real, final resolution didn't happen when we paid off the debt. It happened on a random Tuesday a couple of years later. We were sitting in the living room of our new apartment. It was a small 2-bedroom, nothing fancy. It was clean and we owned the furniture inside. We had just signed the papers on our first actual property purchase, a small 4-unit building. We didn't buy it to flip it. We bought it to manage it, to clean it, to care for it. The cleaning business had become a small local property management empire, built on the reputation of being the most reliable and honest people in the city. We had finally paid off the last of the $312,000 in consumer debt. The final letter from the credit card company arrived in a plain white envelope. Sarah held it. Her hands weren't shaking now. She read it, smiled, and then she slowly, deliberately tore it into 100 tiny pieces. We didn't cheer. We didn't pop champagne. We just sat there in the silence, which wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. "We did it," I said softly. "No," she corrected me, placing her hand on my knee. "We became the kind of people who could do it. That's the real victory, Matt. That was the inner transformation. We didn't become rich by our old definition. We didn't have a jet or a black sedan or a staged apartment. But we had a partnership built on something real. We knew the value of a dollar because we had wiped the sweat from our eyes to earn it. We knew the meaning of true luxury, a good night's sleep without fear. We got married again in a way. Not a ceremony but a recommitment. A quiet vow to always be honest about the money, about the fear, and about the dream. The dream is still freedom. But now it's not the freedom to buy anything. It's the freedom from having to prove anything to anyone. We lost everything, but in that loss we found the only two things that ever really mattered: humility, and each other. If you're out there drowning in the comparison trap, chasing the highlight reel, and feeling the icy grip of shame, remember this. You don't have to become rich to become free. You just have to stop lying to yourself. Hit your reset button. It's the hardest button to push, but on the other side of zero, the air is clean and the foundation is solid. The building you construct there will never fall.